I think Fabiola, who is here with us, must talk to us about the Mexican landscape and vulnerability and climate risk on a subnational level. As a recap on the topics we've been discussing, savings, infrastructure, water management, data, and citizen engagement across different communities in this regard. Thank you.
And thanks to the 75 virtual participants, so I'm going to repeat, we have 4 basins, the Panuco River, the aquifer here in the Yucatan Peninsula, the Cochamala system, and Yaqui River. So without further ado, Paula Rodríguez, she is the boss of research and growth area in environment, Department of Economy from the University, Metropolitan University of Mexico. She was awarded as a Mexican woman scientist. She also is part of an intergovernmental panel. She also participates with UNESCO, also with the National Group Researchers of CONACYT, as well as participation in different forums like LACOC. So thank you, Fabiola. Now I pass you the floor. Let's start with my presentation, please. Can you start projecting? Just a second and we start then. Meanwhile, you can breathe because this has been a long day. Okay, let me see how this works. Let me understand. Good. Well, I want to share the dynamic in terms of water here in Mexico in order to understand all these topics that were discussed as from the point of view of management and how some omissions in the management of water and events associated to the climate change and the variations in the climate could have further effects and make us more vulnerable. In fact, basically 70% of water availability depends on precipitation, which is concentrated during the months of rain or during the rainy season, that is June, between June and October. And only a third part is available for our consumption, and this volume will not consider water that is contaminated. In the end, the volume available for human consumption is much less, since it needs to undergo disinfection processes due to the pollution or contamination of the body waters used to transport these residual waters and their availability to the sea. So this situation makes evident and related to this Santa letter, but action needs to be conducted. Among these actions, obviously, the gathering of water and the storaging of the same are crucial, but where to do it and where not to install this system, where this investment is profitable and where it is not. It all depends on the location of the precipitation and the access to the infrastructure and the margination conditions of the population. On the other hand, we also see one problem associated to how these processes or your urbanization processes have been done in our country. If you can see the zones in the north and the south of the country that dealt with a hydric stress situation, it's the site of the most developed cities with more than 5 million people. We are these big cities where more than 80% of the gross domestic product is created, they have 10 times or more water available naturally, in contrast with the south and the southeast of the country. And the demographic increase, and the increase in the demand of water in industrial sectors, along with the changes in the use of soil, have made availability of water reduced since the 50s. That was 18,000 to a little bit over 3,000 cubic meters per person by 2030. And depending on the city, we will give different uses and different strategies. But on average, and just like in the rest of the world, 70% of the volume that is available of water is used in agriculture. And again, in this Santa letter, we need to reflect upon the relocation of those intensive sectors that use water. And if the cities are dealing with problems for the access of the population to water, we need to relocate these sectors, these intensive sectors in water consumptions, where there's availability, and the ones that remain, they should improve their processes to make them more efficient, and even they should work in the availability of it. They should gather precipitation, they should be more efficient in their productive processes. Besides increasing the investment in the agricultural world, and in order to give them better techniques and release important flows that can be used by the population and some other economic activities that need high quality of water. In terms of the access, even though we see statistics and we are told that 95% of the population has access to the water network, the truth is that more than one quarter of them don't receive it permanently, but it's supplied once a week or twice a week, every 2 weeks, etc. And in these processes of draw, we made a difference between the meteorological drought and hydrological drought. In these processes, we will see that those sites that used to be affected by the lack of access to water, now with the occurrence of these droughts, they will be more affected. And especially, these are places with a marginalized population that increases the conditions of poverty. It is of the utmost importance to push or to promote strategies that allow us to detect and repair leaks, and depending on the city, could go between 35 and 40% of the volume that is usually supplied. As for quality, there are also different actions that need to be conducted, because even though statistics report that 60% of the residual water is treated, the reality is that if we visit the different water treatment plants in the country, most of them are not operating. So the non-official considerations in those reviewed sites, around 20% is the real volume of water that is treated, and these waters are discharged and they contaminate the sites in the sea where they are discharged. And many of the reasons that have cause this problem have to do with the fact that it's a responsibility from the local government, and the local government doesn't have the human or economic resources to maintain these plants in operation. And in this sense, we need to innovate, and we need to find solutions to operate and maintain this crucial infrastructure by modernizing them, or use sun energy to reduce the expenses of the local government on around 60% by only using solar energy. These strategies are feasible, and the cost of not treating these waters can go over 57 billion pesos per year due to the levels of pollutions implied, because this also takes away the access to other water sources. If we don't adapt, will be always more expensive than trying to solve the problem like right now. And unfortunately, that is the type of strategy that has been promoted from many different governments. This is not done by the this administration. So we are losing this greatest opportunity to use 279 cubic meters of water for different productive processes that don't require quality of water. Even the residual waters that go through a naturalization process can be placed again, put again in the fresh water supply. So let's not think of desalinization plants. That's something that I have heard many times, and it seems to me not that feasible. I think that we need to understood the root problems. That is, the water plants of all the countries should be in operation. If the private sector wants desalinization, they should be responsible of their own water plants. That's a way that we can make progress here. We also have a problem of over extraction of underground water. Do you remember those yellow dots we saw? Those yellow dots represent the most important cities. Actually, most of the water in the cities of our country come from underground sources. More than 24% of the aquifers are overexploited, plus those affected by saline intrusion, which makes it evident that we need to deeply review the concession system or the bidding system, the tendering system, sorry. Unfortunately, many of these tenderings need to be reviewed, and they take around 50 years in conditions where the decisions made for the allocation of water can change from one day to the other. If we are in a drought process, the industrial, commercial, and service sector, which is self-replenished, should be able to grant volumes of water for priorities such as the human consumption. But if they say, well, I have this tendering for 50 years, obviously they will resist. Obviously, we need to review these tendering systems to actually add this variability climate idea and to relocate these volumes in a more flexible way. That's the goal. That's the direction of our general law of water, which is a pending issue since 2012. We also have an issue about the climate variability, something that I want to add and I want to say as the other speakers. We have done many bad practices along with the climate change and the changes in the climate. It's not surprising that we are in a vulnerable condition. I want you to review something. It might the monitoring, the drum monitor could have some issues, but in the end it helps us make decisions. This is the instrument that we count with, and that in the end uh, tells us where we need to pay attention to the crisis of water to reduce vulnerability. And if you see, this has variations, and at least in the drought that we had in 2011 and 2012, 95% of the territory had some kind of evidence of drought. And by 2023, 2024, we reached 88%. We are still in March. We haven't reached April and May, which are the hottest months. Obviously, we might have more municipalities affected by drought. And of course, there's a wrong perception of drought. We are talking about drought, and we always think of the north. Monterrey, Chihuahua, Tamaulipas, and these states in the north of the country. But see how many entities and many cities are affected. The basin, the most important basin, which is the basin of Mexico, that is composed by Mexico State and Hidalgo, almost all the territory is affected, and it's been affected since 6 years ago. There have been actions? No, there haven't been any actions to solve the problem. What do we need to do? We need to start doing something. We think that by June it might rain, but this is an evidence of how vulnerable we are. So even if it rains by June, we cannot lose the opportunity to implement those actions that are outstanding. And that's part of the demands that need to be done by the citizenship because authorities have a very short term memory. On the other hand, and about the climate change, the forecast in the short, medium, and long-term scenarios that they will deal with increase in temperature, along with the reduction of precipitation and the scenarios of lack of availability of water, and that's the kind of work that we do. Besides saving water bodies, we have considered a reduction of around 21% of availability of water, which will generate much more dependence to external sources and pressure to underground water. So this is something we need to reflect upon. We need to consider the actions because many of the cities can reach this famous day zero that has been exploited by the politician in these elections, but this is a reality that we need to be ready to face. In the specific case of the Mexico's Valley Basin, which is a closed basin, along the years we have seen its transformation. There's been a fight against water and a very complex relation between the human and the water to empty the 6 lakes that used to exist connected and the urbanization without control in the whole zone. Obviously, with very important water demands, and well, as you can see, in terms of climate variability, please see here, different municipalities from the Mexico state are already facing an increase in temperature because of the changes in the use of soil. Important reductions in precipitation of around 20 or 30% because of the changes of the uses in soil. And these municipalities are also some of the poorest. And well, probably in the studies or in the pictures of vegetation, it seems like we have a lot of water, but in the field work that we have done by going through these municipalities and these indigenous cities, we see the real problem. We can see the lack of crops, the lack of access, and the poverty. The satellite says something, but the field says a different story. So we need to do some field research and not to take only into consideration the images from the satellite. The perspective changes completely. In the scenarios that we have calculated, which the orders to improve the capacities for adaptation, we identified that in the short and medium term for the Mexican basin, there will be a decrease in availability, and in the long term 40%. What are the implications of this conflict? All of the users of water will want to guarantee their volumes of water to keep on producing and to and nobody talks about the environment. That's the only user that is not in this table to prevent these ecosystems. This is just a chunk of the Cuchamala system that depends on the shallow waters. That is at 38% of this storage capacity, this system of dams. That's why we are concerned about the supply in the upcoming month, shows us the real situation and the risk situation that we will have to deal with in the following years, because the forecast is that there will be an increase in frequency and intensity. On the other hand, a paramount component has been governance. We made some work reviewing the different elements that are areas of opportunity for the basin councils. which unfortunately that's one of the few governance space in the water sector that and unfortunately in the last administration they have been unprotected. They don't have funds. 30 people which were in an area, now there's just one, and this is part of a great effort for from of 60 years to implement a management model, and with one word everything was destroyed. So we need to restart to strengthen these spaces. We have reviewed which are the opportunity areas. We know that many of these decision making processes on water depend on politics, with a high rotation of staff, with not enough resources. And unfortunately, the management of water, even if it's a priority in the speech, it's not translated into a priority in the allocation of resources. So this increases the condition of vulnerability. On the other hand, we don't have any mechanisms to assess the development of or supervision. There are no mechanisms of transparency to know how many resources there are or how they are allocated, and we don't have the resources to push the participation, to question the representative this representation. So given this complex context, let's see where we need to intervene, because we need to move from the study in our labs to actions. So we started a process to save the La Piedad Lagoon in Cuautitlan Ixtali neighborhood, which is one of the areas that we identified with more content of water, so the recovery process is easier. We have been there for more than 6 years. And despite these 6 years, we haven't started the intervention yet. Why? Because these are super long processes where we need to add stakeholders, where there needs to be a commitment from the local authorities. This is an ejido or a community, self-governed community. So we have made some progress in the technical design. We are going to build a linear park of 1.5 kilometers with a system of floating crops. We have explored which are the best plants, and the idea is to build a recovery plan to recover the water and to dam the climate change. And instead of have organization, we should have a connectivity place to form an alternative site of access to water. Only the recovery of La Laguna lagoon, it could produce 1 cubic meter per second to say to supply the needs of places such as Ecatepec. Unfortunately, in order to make some progress in the project, we need to start these plants, the works of these plants. This is something that we have tried to do during these 6 years. However, the owners of the land have tried to do this for more than 20 years. That's why I told you these are long processes. None of the plants work. Since 2003, La Piedad Lagoon receives the residual waters from two areas of apartments and housings. This is done used for touristic purposes, but the government allows irregular settlements, which makes it more harder. And this type of complexities are the ones that we can see in all the territory. It's not only for La Piedad Lagoon; it can be found in all the territory. We have documented different species. More than 1,539 are under the norm 059, which has prevented the irregular settlements, and we have prevented the the destruction of the lagoon. So we need to find different ways or different mechanisms and strategies to stop social processes. And since there's no local, state, or federal government, makes our work even harder to save a water body. Our project contains implies different activities. First, the community participation, and I think that in order for the project to work, we need to participate along with the community besides doing some research activities to determine if this solution based on nature can actually remove pollutants, emerging pollutants that can be found in the water. So it's not surprising to have kidney or cancer issues because these emerging pollutants are not removed by the treatment plant and they go back as potable water or running water to our homes. And I'm talking about antihistaminics, hormones, etc. So we need to think of new mechanisms to treat the residual water that will allow us that these pollutants won't be in the water anymore. So we are promoting different agricultural, classic agricultural practices, and along with the owners of the lands, we have tried to find different economic activities based on the conservation of the lagoon that warranties these owning processes. The restoration of the ecology won't guarantee the success of this project if we forget that in this territory there are economic activities and population. So a lagoon will be back for 1 year only, but 5 years later it will be gone. If we forget that there is population and economic activities and they both make use of these spaces. We have also worked to strengthen the governance. Just as I told before, it's been hard to make things happen. That's why we assembled an auxiliary organ to help the basin that was approved on March 21st. We made this commitment, this group to protect different lagoons, which this has allowed us to have a more direct conversation with authorities, and in the end, we can keep these positive synergies of the stakeholders, local stakeholders, which have taken great part of the activities for such as cleaning, rescuing of the lagoon. We also work with them to create a marginal collector, which is a paramount requisite along with the treatment plant. And we are waiting for an answer from the authorities to make progress with these infrastructures. And that's why funding is important. If we don't actually clean and we don't and if we don't start the activities of the treatment plants, no plan will be useful or successful. If these dialogues are to find which are the alternatives, I can tell you that the water treatment plants are a priority. If we do have resources, that is the answer. So let's keep this in mind. That should be the first place. We have even done some work to make the citizens sensitive, to let them know that these investments are good. And the carbon capture for these communities would represent around 25 million pesos. Places such as different places such as the wetlands, they could be of great benefit. We actually haven't found out what's missing for make things happen. We don't understand what's missing. If everything is done, if the work, the way the community is done, if we have already achieved the everything with the assembly, so what the hell is happening? What are we missing to start the plants and to recover those water plants? What are we missing? You should tell me. Please tell me what's missing. Sorry, they are speaking, but I can't hear what they are saying. We have started different survey processes to document the benefits on the health. So now we are recovering the information, and we're trying to find out how many times they have gotten sick, how much they have spent, how many days in hospital, medicine, and other kind of problems, just to have an estimate of co-benefits. Our calculation about the potential of carbon capture was done by the satellite. However, we need to go to the field. We need to know how much is being sequestrated in roots and foliage. And our main idea is to advance the project and to create a conceptual note that will be presented to the Green Fund, where we need hard data, and we are using analysis community, and we are using the information from the La Piedad lagoon in order to have this green corridor that we want to have in the north, just as Chapultepec, but productive, because it will have productive system. But in order to make progress in all this work that we have been doing for 7 years, we only need the goodwill to start to kick up these water treatment plants. All this information that has been documented and I have shared with you can be found. For example, this book on the droughts of Mexico has been published. You will find all the diagnosis of the what's going on in the country and the solutions. It's available in this link, and part of the material that you can see here, these are different reports. And to understand what's going on with the basins and understand these scenarios, from the perspective of the Mexico's basin, can also be consulted, can be read. I really appreciate your attention. Does anybody have any question? The water treatment plants, given the 115 constitutional article, are on the local government. However, depending on the size, they may depend on the municipal government. In the case of La Piedad and Tepojaco, that add up 380 liters per second, they depend on the local government. They haven't operated since 2013. Obviously, there are regulations that say that the regulation plants in cities with more than 500,000 people should be working. So we have these authorities that are not complying with the guidelines. But we need to consider one figure or someone who can conduct these audits and recommendations. The other big plant, that is the mega plant of Guadalupe, has a capacity of 750 liters per second. So they could work, but these are millenary investments that are there and they are not being used. Hi, Fabiola. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's an incredible presentation, and the way you are saying the things in this very blunt way, I think that, well, I'm very thankful for your words. I do have some questions that I want to ask you, some gossips that I want to share with you, especially for the water treatment plants. Some, like 1 year and a half, I had an interview with Ruben Munoz from a commission. You know which commission? We were talking to him, and we showed him all these projects that we had to clean the water in the Yucatan Peninsula using advanced technologies, very cheap technologies. I tell you that the treatment for these biological plants per cubic meter is around 15 or 18 pesos. You need trained staff, you need a very important infrastructure. The energy expense is huge. Now we have a Mexican technology that have been tested that can treat 1 cubic meter for 80 cents peso. So we were talking to him. He opened his doors to an existing fund for cleaning the waters, but this fund can only be used by the municipalities. Only the municipality can request that fund, obviously with all the project already assembled on how, when, and who, and etc., with all the benefits, the social and economic benefits available. So in this sense, you might come to him and do the things through the municipality in order to revive these white elephants and not to use the old technology. The kind of water that we have now are not usual or common residual waters that need to be treated with advanced technologies and energy wise are much more feasible. On the other hand, here in Yucatan, we are pioneers to monitor real for monitoring in real time the underground water. But this can also be added, or we want to implement this in other states of the region. If at some point we can discuss this, that would be so good to integrate our forces to fight for water and and to have a and to receive your help as an economist to us to us that we are water scientists, especially for cenotes, which we are also trying to be considered as carbon system because they are much more than carbon system. They are already in risk, and that is the case of the Yucatan Peninsula. And in this sense, now how can we translate? How can we pass this from and using our willpower to implement all these incredible projects you are showing? We just closed some projects with the Mexican Fund for the Nature Conservation. This is one of the products. How can we do it? That's a step by step. And what should we be careful with once you consider these bonds? Because even for because they need to pay taxes. So how can we do it? If you want to, we have a link of the whole project, the final project. So, well, just in case you want it, we can share it with you. And again, thank you so much. Thanks to you. Your presentation was very interesting. There are two things I want to discuss. One, negotiation. So, which are the mechanisms to do that and how to achieve it? Because we know that this is the hard part. There are very strong interest, and I cannot give further detail on this, but I would like to hear it from you. I think that you have worked with this, and the other thing is the modification of the use of the soil. I consider that one mechanism that needs to be implemented is that the organization of the territory it should not be a goodwill letter, but rather an element of the law that forces to avoid the change in the use of soil, no matter if it is for a human settlement, people who come for to the cities because they don't have other options. That's need to be considered. These are migrants happening, and probably this could solve some issues at local, at an international level. Yes, of course, the review of the tendering is a task to be reviewed by the general law of water, and in this sense, there should be some kind of luck to consider the climate variability, to consider this tendering, and to use some kind of mechanism in which you might treat your residual water. You can use it for productive systems. You don't use fresh water for cement or for painting. Of course, you need to treat your water. You can use your residual water, and the volume that is granted can be released water to attend important functions such as human contact water to be drunk for the production of a food. We need to keep the levels of quality there. So there are different types of mechanisms that need to be reviewed. Obviously, this implies a political hit to that who wants to start it, but necessary. And I think that this situation is a good opportunity window because we have the sensibility and the availability of different stakeholders. In the end, with no water, there's no business. And with no water, then the population won't be able to guarantee their life quality. So everyone is sensitive to find these options. So if we are waiting for the rain in June, and let's imagine that it might rain, that's the trend in the climate, so we are to undraw this emergency again, and then 4 to 5 years later we will be in this urgency of the day zero, and again we will be in a problem, and we will have lost a very valuable opportunity to create the right conditions to get the water resiliency. But in the past, we have had these opportunities, but we haven't used them. And in the case of the uses of soil, we have the use of soil guidelines. What are we missing? The local government. I know that at political wise, we are not going to relocate. However, it's something that we need to do. You're told that you cannot settle here. I'm not saying this just out of the blue. This has been stated from decades ago. Why not? Because this is a richer zone, because it's a fragile zone, because there are resources of great priority. You cannot settle here, so you need to relocate, to relocate somewhere else. But we need the government. Where we talk about the local owners, the commissioner of these local owners cannot deal with this problem himself or herself because they don't have the legal capacity or the political muscle to move the population. And if this person is abandoned, even though they request for help, we will be dealing with this problem. So we do need coordination and assume that politically this is going to happen. So you are not going to be as popular as you want, but you need to comply with the law. And that's hard. That's a true challenge. I agree with that. Thank you so much. There's another question. Yes, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to say, and well, you're saying that many of the things depend on the municipality to reactivate these water treatment plants. Something that I have seen, in fact, I was in the Moses session. I've seen that when alliances between municipalities are created to manage these topics, then we don't depend on elections. These are associations that linger in time. So they can participate no matter the region. All the municipalities participate in the cleaning and the management of garbage. These are things that depend on the municipality. So, well, that's my comment. That's something that I've seen, and I've seen that it works. Sergio Graf is over there. He's from Jalisco. Actually, he has pushed this system or these alliances in Jalisco for more than 20 years. For more than 20, sorry. So it would be great to do it. And something else. My question is, how do you regard, because, well, in terms of change for the citizens, for the inhabitants, they are told not to use too much water, like for washing the dishes. That way, you're going to use fewer liters of water. So, is this true? Because, well, I think that this is a way to tell inhabitants that what to do. But are they really important? The will of the citizens is there, but I see some other kind of hegemony and and speeches that have been discussed. Things that have to do with the forest or with the tenderings. So, what's your opinion in that regard? Well, I think that all the sectors need to participate. The citizen might be told, be more efficient, and I think that this adds up. But what about the public sector will, with its responsibility on water treatment plants and the crop system? Where is the will of the private sector with more efficient processes in the consumption of water, the responsibility for treating their waters? So they are really thinking of constructing desalination plant, but they are not thinking of what can I do with the residual waters. It's not That's not possible. They need to go to the root. So besides the volume that you consume, the citizen needs to be aware of their hydric footprint. What about eating meat? How many liters? What does it imply using denim or jeans or torn pants? That are cool, but how many liters do you need to get them? What kind of clothes do should you wear? And in the end, we as consumer can determine which products we say yes and which not, and under which standards. So in that sense, I think that this is what we should do along with other sectors, because it's not fair to say only a domestic sector should consume less and the others, well, it's okay. We should change, all of us, and this needs to be demanded. If you want to be here as an industry, you need to perform good practices. We cannot continue with this vision of pollutant paradises, and no matter if you pollute, if you are bringing us some employees, the world is not like that. That's the direction of our efforts, or that should be the direction of our efforts. Thanks, Fabiola. I really love that phrase. The idea that the environment should be with us. More than 70 people are watching us. We should be the voice of the environment